Thank you so much for being on board Transatlantic. I mean, what a day. Like, your career and your ocean is fascinating, to say the least. So I'm very excited to have you on board on Transatlantic. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
So look, as you know, we believe that each of us is an ocean of erratic thoughts and wild feelings. And we are here to cross your ocean through the 7 questions, like the 7 C's. So I would say, let's just go through it. The very first question, and I'm super excited. Okay, good. Reports of mermaids sightings by explorers and sailors were surprisingly common. Sometimes they were said to save sailors from drowning, and other times they were depicted as malicious creatures with powers to endanger sailors. In other cases, they made for some fantastic tales. Mermaids bring a sense of wonder from foreign lands, and it's a sense of wonder that's truly fascinating. For instance, an epic like poem, a saga of 30,000 lines was written by one of the most famous like Thai poets. Now you hail from Thailand, a fascinating country. What sense of wonder do you bring into your work? What type of stories feed your creativity?
I think I always obsess with the idea of magic, right? Since I was little, I remember growing up with my 3 sisters, 2 sisters and myself, you know, watching Disney movie, and we didn't even speak English back then, right? And you kind of follow the storyline. Like, let's say we watched the Cinderella, and you know, there's a scene that everyone loved, which is the scene when fairy godmother turned Cinderella into like this beautiful, you know, she's had like beautiful dress, and my sister was like, oh, I want to be Cinderella, I want to be Cinderella. But for me, I was like, I didn't really want to be Cinderella, but I'm much more obsessed with being the fairy godmother. The power, you know, to turn a pumpkin into the carriage, or, you know, a mouse turn into the driver, or Cinderella from, you know, scrappy dress into this beautiful, wonderful dress. So I was fascinating with the idea of magic. I think, you know, when you think about design is when an idea become visible or become tangible, right? So when I tell the story, I always want to, or like my vibe anyways, create this fantastical story, creating the idea of escapism, that you're not really sure where you are. It's like the new world that you might not experience before. And I think that's always been, you know, the way I tell the story through magic, or use the power of magic.
You know, magic is such an interesting like element. Myself, I think, for instance, like, you know, the ideas like found us. I'm a true believer. Like, you know, it's not us that like look for idea, but they found us. And I actually think that, you know, they are the greatest idea that you can have. They're already there. It's just about like, you know, either you let them knock at your door, or you don't let them, like, you know, and then you have like a process or a method like for allow them to knock your door. But so I always look at the world of creativity, the universe of creativity has a magic. So now that you were saying that, I recognize a lot of those elements in like my creative process. That's very interesting.
Right. It's just, you know, you could have an idea, but then that's what we do, right? As creative, to make that idea become visible. What does it look like? What does it sound like if you do a sound design? What is the touch and feeling of a product design? Or what's the copy, you know, how does that translate into a story form? So I think we are all magicians, right?
Yeah, and the way we make it visible, it reminds me of like when I was a kid, even my daughters, like, you know, when you go like there is a frosty glass and you try like, you know, to clean it up with your hand, you know, the glass of your car when it's very cold outside on the window in the kitchen, like you try to clean up with your hand. And that's how like the process of like getting like clarity, like, you know, trying to get an idea out of like this fog that exists in front of us. Good. Second question. Sometimes you gotta cut a little piece of yourself off, no matter how it hurts, in order to grow. These were the words whispered by Charles Arthur Salvador, better known as Charles Bronson, to Tom Hardy during a phone conversation from his prison cell. It was a transatlantic conversation, not just like geographically speaking, but mindset speaking. From one side, you have one of the most talented actors of our generation. On the other side, you have a convicted criminal. But it's true, sometimes you do have to cut little pieces off of yourself in order to grow. It happened to me. It's something that I can relate to. What part of yourself did you have to let go for you to grow into the person that you are today? Or maybe did you keep everything in places and you just reshuffle according to the destiny?
I think as a human being, it's always hard to cut who you are, right? But, you know, sometimes it's about adaptation. Like for me, I was always that art kid that, you know, I was going to grow up and always dream of become an artist, and then feel like, you know, that you're probably not going to make a living out very well. And then it translates into like design. What I have learned from my career is, you know, I was such a true designer and true artist. And I always like into this purity of creativity. But then I almost, as I start my own business at Design Army, I need to start cutting that creativity side and really learn the business side. Mm. You know, and it's almost like you have to, in order to be a successful designer or creator, you need to speak the business language, right, with the client, because every one of us have clients and they are hiring us and paying us to dream for them. However, you can't just like go on like this crazy artist dream. You also have to learn, you know, put the business side where like the business should, or you know, speak the business language and learn how to present your work in the way that they would understand in order for your dream to win, right? So if sometimes you just presenting the dream in the artistic way that they can't relate to, that piece of design or that piece of film would never get produced. So it's almost like, you know, not lose who I am, but really learn how to be a business person and really understand the business of creativity. And I think that's something that I have been learning, you know, and translate myself from a young designer to where I am today.
It's so valuable for like, you know, young generation. It's like for everybody actually, like, not just young generation, for everybody who wants to like take a stab at being like a very well-rounded, like creative, like, you know, I mean, you transmute creativity. Yeah, I gotta say, like, you have the best framing, you know, the transatlantic episode. I mean, honestly, it's just perfect. I could take it right there and make like, you know, a painting.
Thank you. This is like not the Zoom paper background.
I mean, you can tell, right? But then there is the business side, and that's something that, like, at least I personally like struggle enormously. Like, you know, it's something that is really not in my course. It's something that like had to work really hard for it. But I came to terms with that, and I do believe like that to be a truly well-rounded creative, you need to have that kind of side. Otherwise, you just like, you know, have just one part of it. But in the process, you're right. At least for me, like, you know, I had to cut pieces off myself, and those were the pieces that, like, you know, kept me like just like these moody and crazy creative that doesn't care about anything else. It doesn't want to be pragmatic, but it doesn't work that way. So that was a really good analysis. Okay, we are in Thailand now.
Okay.
Danny Boyle's film of the Alex Garland novel, The Beach, was filmed on Hat Maya, the main beach of Phi Phi Island. The area was damaged by the movie crew and its ecosystem was in danger. In fact, they imported like palms and planted them to make it look like even more beautiful because for them it wasn't pretty enough. Now, fortunately, the area has now recovered, but this shows how far the movie industry is willing to go to tell a story, right? There is a line that they cross, and in the name of like telling a story. Now, we work in an industry that prides itself on storytelling. And my question for you is, how far would you go to tell a story? What are you willing to sacrifice?
Well, first of all, I would not, go there and kill the Thailand beach. That's like the most horrible thing that can happen. I love southern Thailand. If no one ever been there, you should check out after this pandemic. Well, I think my job is to make sure that whatever that we dream in our head, that I can see, right? A lot of times as a creative, you can see of what you want to do, what you want to say, how you want to look. Get translate into something that you can see. Mm-hmm. So, for me, I go pretty far. Like I'm very detailed person that, if there's certain like color and feeling that I need to communicate and, people say, oh, we can't do that. I was like, yes, everything is possible. And I always challenge myself and my team to go further than we can ever imagine. A lot of time, we sketch a story out or a piece of design or art direction, and we have no idea how the hell we are going to be able to execute that. However, if you limit yourself there and worry about how we're gonna get there, then you're never gonna create something that meaningful and different, right? So I go pretty far. I do whatever it takes to get my idea across, or our team's, design sensibility to become tangible. Without, go kill like, the beach and environment. Of course, like I'm definitely will not do that. I mean, there's certain type of client I won't take.
Right.
So.
I asked this question because in my personal experience, so when I use a lot of like childhood memories when I work on something, and like, and most of the time I go back into the time of my life and I pick up on memories and I work into like an idea and a concept. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I draw a line. Sometimes I know that there are memories that I'm not willing to take and bring it into like, a creative concept. I don't want to touch them. I don't want to make them dirty with anything. I want them to be just clear as possible. And there are other memories that belong to my childhood that I'm willing to go there and to use them to create like a creative concept. In fact, like some of my best friends, like, in some of my work, they recognize me because they have known me for a long time, so they know what are my idiosyncrasies. So when they see a commercial or something, they can say, oh, you did that because I remember you were doing that all the time. But then there are memories that I don't touch. I don't want to go there. I don't want to use them. And that's me. And that's for me, that's the line that I draw. Like, that's my Thailand beach that I say I'm not going to touch it. So that's why I like...
You protect your privacy, yes, of your thinking, yes, of what...
The same things I do with the language. Like one of the reasons why I came to the United States is because like I realized early in my career that my Italian language was being affected by like the advertising language. And I didn't want that because I start as a writer like in Italy. And so I say to myself, you know what, I'm going to move to a different country. I'm going to learn a different language and I'm going to use that language to write in advertising, but I'm gonna keep my Italian just for me. I'm not gonna make it dirty with anything. It's just pure and clear, So anyway, I mean, that's like, my process, but good. Look, this is a 4th question. This is a story of 2 symbolic oceans, a father and a son. Percy Carey, the father of actor and comedian Jim Carrey, passed away in September 1994, 3 weeks after the release of The Mask. Jim put a $10 million check in his father's pocket when he was birthed. He was the check Jim wrote to himself a few years earlier as a promise to make it in the movie business. Jim's father lived a life of compromise and ended up working a job he didn't love. He got laid off from the job that he hated and ended up in the streets with Jim when he was a kid. The lesson that Jim Carrey learned from his father is that you can fail at what you hate, so you might as well do what you love. Was there ever a lesson that someone in your family passed on to you that became essential to your career?
Well, my mom, she's the best, biggest inspiration. And one thing that I have learned from her since when I was little is, PUM, she said, PUM, you really need to work on your weakness until it becomes your strength. And I remember as a child, I always really afraid of public speaking or, go in front of the class and talk and present anything. Or even when I came here in the United States as a young designer, I'm really good as a designer, like designing things. But when I present the work, I'm like all scared. I don't know what to say. Or when we start designing, people ask me to go to speak on the stage, and I'm just have like that phobia, right? And to be speaking in front of the big audience. And then, this work on your weakness until it becomes your strength. It's like such a valuable lesson because you always want to improve and not run away from the fear. Every one of us have fear of doing something, right? But then if it's like something presented to you and you are in fear and you don't want to go give a speech at a design conference, let's say, you miss that opportunity. So to be able to learn to conquer your own fear and your weakness, I think it's something valuable that my mom taught me.
That's a beautiful lesson, I mean, those are the best lessons because really like they shape your personality and like, they help you grow. And I mean, like, I totally agree with that lesson. Like, it truly like you had to do what make you uncomfortable. And I try like, to apply this to every single day of my life, even down to like my workout routine in the morning. I try always to pick the exercise that I hate the most, man. Like, like I hate mountain climbers. I really hate those exercises, but I do it every single day.
You have to, same thing as like as kids, you try to teach your kids to ride a bike, right? It's very scary for like little kids with helmet on and ride a bike, and you're gonna fall down many times. And then you fall down and you just have to have the energy, cry a little, okay, get up and keep riding the bike until one day you'll be able to ride faster and faster and faster. And then you become pro at that.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, fifth question. We are just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year, running over the same old ground. What have we found? The same old fears. These are the words of two of the brightest minds of our generation combined, David Gilmour and Roger Waters. The song honors the lost sheer genius of Syd Barrett, the original founder of Pink Floyd. If you were to bring back a legendary advertising fish from the past you can swim with in a fishbowl, who would that be?
Probably Tibor, Kalman, and he's not the advertising guy, he's a designer, right? And he's a designer who responsible for the United, I don't know, you remember from the 90s, United Color.
I remember, I'll tell you later. I remember.
Campaign.
Yeah.
I admire his work so much, and he probably one of the reasons that I wanted to to study graphic design, actually, because I remember growing up in Thailand, you know, you see all this clothing brand, they use like beautiful model and, you know, they all happy. And then for sudden you see this ad of the priest kissing the nun. And it's a no copy, right? Just have the logo say United Color of Benetton. And then there's like one ad, have like a raw heart. And it's like the same identical 3 hearts. And then the copy say white, black, and yellow. And I was like, whatever this thing is, I want to do for the living because it's captivated me. And, you know, and I just find out, I never heard of United Color of Benetton before. And then I find out, oh my God, this is for a clothing brand. I mean, what a visionary. You know, this is like the 80s, 90s. I mean, he's already talking about diversity. He already talked, you know, looking at the creative execution in a way that no one had touched that space before. And it's very humanity, you know, in terms of execution, which, you know, I would love an opportunity to sit down one-on-one with him. You know, one of the quotes that I read his book, and he say the difference between a good designer and great designer is the intelligent. And that's what make a huge difference between the two.
You know, like I was saying to you, so I studied science communication, and one of my teachers was actually Oliviero Toscani.
Oh my God! Yeah, he's
very familiar. I mean, everybody growing up in Italy in that era, right, was very familiar, right. Like Benetton. Growing up in Italy, I wasn't familiar with Tibor. You know, it wasn't something that I had like a good grasp. But when I moved to the States, somehow, in a very serendipitous way, I just bumped into his work. And I got so obsessed with his work that I started reading every single thing about him, every single thing. And when I think about him, somehow, I don't know why, it always made me think like the way he passed away. He was sick. He had like, you know, bad shape, bad health. But his work was so beautiful, so graceful, and so, it's such a visionary. And it's strange because in my life happened that sometimes I get really stuck onto some people, and I just like get obsessed, and I want to know everything. And he's one of the person actually I would like to bring back as well. And
yeah, I think it's true. Very bold, very original, very ahead of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. Okay. A food chain in the ocean begins with tiny one-cell organisms called diatoms, which make their own food from sunlight. Shrimp-like creatures eat the diatoms, small fish eat the shrimp-like creature, and bigger fish eat small fish, and so on. When I look at the ocean of our creative industry from 35,000 feet above, I see a different kind of food chain. I see a psychological game. You survive if you are able to manage your emotions, stay focused, and make sure that you don't give too much meaning to something that happened around you and that could affect your ultimate goal. Because those are the things that eat you up, and that's the type of food chain that spits you up. Do you agree, or is there a more important trait to survive in this industry?
Adaptation. You know, you got to be able to adapt to our ever-changing world. You know, it's like there's like one species that survived thousands, like millions of years, like a frog, right? A frog, you want to be this frog that be able to adapt to different color and environment, like a green frog, and then you see the predator coming and it's fall, and then you turn red, so you can survive, so someone not eating you up. And then in the winter time, it's you know, below 20 degrees Celsius and it's cold, and the frog is developing this shell so they can survive until the springtime comes. You know, the world is changing so fast right now. And sometimes, you know, people are like, what's the future? What's the future? I really feel like we are living in the future. at the moment. And, you know, the future is like today, like right now. So like, how are you adapting to that? You know, when I started as a graphic designer, which is a great training, right? Like you got to learn a lot about like color theory and design composition, how typography. So it's like very specific, you know, way to think of like branding and design. But then we adapted when we started design. We started as a graphic design background, and then we adapted to art direction, like, you know, creating movie, creating photography, or work with like magazine, and to creating like this really cool visual language that no one have seen of. And then, you know, the magazine is like dying, right? So then what you go adapt to digital, like, and everyone's like going to the digital route. And now like gaming with metaverse, like how do I use my graphic design skill in this new metaverse gaming world that is about to happen? I mean, we are entered the Web 3.0 at this point. You know, my daughter is like constantly game, and gaming is not like playing game. We play Atari, right? That's their Facebook, that's their Instagram. They are socialized while playing at the same time. You know, the other day, it's like, you know, I was like, what do you want for your birthday? She said, I want this digital clothes. And I'm like, what do you mean digital clothes? And they call skin.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, like you can buy, let's say, a Gucci real sweater, or you can buy the digital Gucci in your metaverse world or in your game.
Yeah, crazy.
And that's how, you know, so like how we have to ask ourselves, it's storytelling that I learned and design that I learned is really relevant to what's going on in her life as a 16 years old, because she's growing up with this metaverse world, and we need to adapt completely.
I completely agree with you. And, you know, I have two daughters, and like one of them is like 9 years old. So you already can see like how she lives like in a different way. I like the idea when you say it's like we're living in the future. There is not like, hey, wait, let's wait for the future to arrive. No, the future is there. It's you. It's now. And I see like through my daughter's eyes. You know, I constantly see like the future like passing through her eyes, and like, you know, it reflected onto me, onto my life. And the only word that comes to my mind is adaptation. Either you adapt or you left behind. And if you left behind, then it's just like a word of solitude, and like your creativity dries up. And so like, that's a key word. It's a beautiful, like, you know, advice for everybody.
I mean, for me, the new motto after this year, I tell myself, change or die.
Absolutely.
You have no choice.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And
you have to change.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, man. It's like, and I hope that some of the companies out there learn the lesson and like trying to change and not like keep things like how they were. At least we can take like one good things from these like sucky here that we have been like, you know, locked up at home. Anyway.
But change is constant too, you know, so it almost, yeah. I have to think of being this frog that I'm changing today. 2 weeks from now, there's going to be something else happen again. So I'm just like, okay, fine, we'll go with the flow, which is really hard for me because sometimes I'm such a planner and I want to know where I'm going and what we are doing next. I think it's good to have a plan, but be willing to change your plan and don't get upset over it if that plan cannot be at your timelines of your career or your life, right? Because there's certain things we can't control.
Absolutely. Like, you know, I have the back of my neck, I have tattoo like a Latin word. It means like pantare, which means like, you know, everything's like flow, everything change. You can't like get wet in the river twice, you know, in the same river twice, only once, you know. And there is different interpretation of that, you know, it's actually Greek, like, you know, of that like sentence. But my interpretation is like, you know, truly living in the future, truly like, you know, trying to change constantly all the time, because everything is in constant evolution. And if you don't do it, then just like, you know, you're left behind again, like, you know, and mostly like, I think like your creativity is gonna dries up. And that's what like I'm really concerned and afraid of, that one day, if I don't adapt, whatever I have, whatever little talent I have, is going to dry up and it's going to disappear, you know?
Yeah, I have designed army for almost 20 years now, but I tell myself every morning that I need to think like a startup, always.
Yeah, that's a good advice. That's a
always
good
think
advice.
as a startup, I remember how hungry I was, how excited about anything, new clients, new projects, and, think like a startup, but act like an adult.
I love it. Hey, look, we arrive at the shore. So this is the last question for all our guests. If there was a wind that blows your sail and you were to name that wind, what would that be?
Magic.
Magic. I kind of knew it because like that makes like a perfect circle, we're back to the first question. I love
it's there's something even with the word, right? Magic.
Yeah. My God, I'm so with you. You know who I like about magic? David Blaine. Because it truly like remind me a person that use magic like to inspire people and like, and he has a different kind of perspective on magic. Because I think like when we growing up in the 90s, when you think of magic, you think about the circus. So you think about an illusionist, right? You don't think about the good magic, the mysterious magic, the one that like is around you and like it makes the universe spin around. So I love ending with the word. That's great. Hey, look, Pom, like it was a great, like, ocean crossing, as I like to say, and very inspiring. Like, there are bits of like greatness of what you just say. And I will cherish this, like, and I'm so excited to share this, like, with my audience. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And this is fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.